Now, a little while ago, I disassembled a video which seriously misunderstood atheism and religion. Yeah, that sounds like pretty much every video I take on, but the maker challenged me to go after some of his other videos, which I agreed to do. Unfortunately, I was in the middle of sounding like death warmed over, so I told him that it would have to wait until I had a voice that got back to normal. It's not quite there yet, but it's close enough that I can take a look at a video called The Death Knell of Atheism and see what he has to say. I'm sorry it took so long, but if you watched my I Hate Being Sick video, you know what I was up against. Therefore, let's take a look at his view of atheism and why I'm pretty sure he doesn't know what atheism means.
Hello, my name is Ya Chao. Today, the subject I want to talk to you about is the Death Knell of Atheism.
Hey, great! I always love being challenged. Let's get started.
There is a constant debate going on between the atheist and the theist.
And I'm sorry to tell you this, but the theists are losing badly. Now, granted, they don't really care if they lose because they don't really care if there's a God or not. They believe what makes them feel good, not caring whether or not there's any evidence supporting their beliefs or not. It's really no different than debating flat earthers or cryptozoologists or alien abductees or any of the other emotionally driven, wishful thinkers out there. They have nothing of substance to present, and their entire belief system is based on feelings. And I'm sorry, but that's not something to be proud of.
The debate is whether God exists. This is a very important question which has a profound influence on our life.
Well, it would if there was any objectively demonstrable evidence for it. And unfortunately for the religious, there isn't.
Before diving into the discussion, let's think about something first. If you ask a child to count from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and up, how long does it take to get to infinity?
Well, you can't get to infinity because infinity doesn't exist in the real world. Infinity isn't real except as a mathematical concept.
I think we all agree that if anyone has a sound mind, knows that it is impossible to reach infinity.
Because it's an imaginary construct. And that makes a lot of the characteristics invented about the various gods imaginary too. Because they simply cannot have powers that extend into infinity. They can't be eternal. They can't be all powerful. It simply isn't possible.
For the same token, you cannot count from infinity back to 1 either. Now, if you have a cherry, this cherry cannot explain its existence.
A cherry can't talk. Obviously, it can't explain anything. But the cherry clearly does exist, whether its existence can be explained or not. Now, of course, it can be, but I don't think that's where this is going.
Because it comes from a cherry tree.
And the cherry tree can't explain anything either. Lather, rinse, repeat.
And the cherry tree cannot explain its existence either because maybe someone ate a cherry and spit the seed onto the ground, then came the cherry tree.
Which really doesn't matter because all cherry trees come from seeds regardless of the process that the seed got into the ground. It doesn't matter if some animal came along, ate the cherry, and excreted the seed on the ground. The end results are the same.
We can keep going backward, finding the causes, so we will get a chain of causes and effects.
Yeah, this is what I thought he was up to. The fallacious claim that because you can't have infinite regress, his imaginary friend has to be responsible. All without providing any evidence whatsoever that his imaginary friend is real. And this is really an argument from ignorance at work. I don't understand how it worked, therefore God. This is really a sad way to start out, I'm sorry to say. So let's see if I was right.
You can also think from yourself. You have a cause, which is your father. If your father never existed, you wouldn't be here either. So you can trace back to your grandfather and the great-grandfather and so forth.
Yeah. That doesn't mean you can arbitrarily invent some kind of first cause because you can't come up with any other solutions. And that's really where this is going. So once he gets there, I figure I'll have to go through a full refutation of the first cause argument. But hey, we can be patient, can't we?
Therefore, we can start from any existing object. We can find one of its causes. The cause must pre-existed before the object.
Yep, there we are. Called it. This is a really old argument that hasn't been taken seriously except by the religious for a very long time. It's had various forms over the years, from the Kalam version to the Aristotelian version to the Thomistic version. It's even been revived in recent years by William Lane Craig, and it makes no more sense there than it did before. Now, the problem here is in the assumptions that the argument makes. Assumptions which are really common sense things that people just know that are simply wrong. It's a folksy knowledge claim that is wrong far more often than it's right. So let's look at some of the problems we have here. First, the whole argument is a case of special pleading. It argues that everything has to have a cause except God. Why is God the exception? If your argument is that everything needs a cause, then since God is part of everything, why does God not need a cause? And if God gets to be an exception, why can't there be other exceptions? And besides, why does God get to be that cause? Why not the flying spaghetti monster? Why not Bobo the tree god? Why not magical universe creating pixies? None of these is a better or worse option than God. Oh, there are some theists out there who say they don't know what it is, they're just going to call it God. Following which they go on to arbitrarily tell us all the things that this God thing wants, what it's like, and what's going to happen to people if they don't bow down and kiss its ass. So clearly, they're not just labeling some unknown thing, if that thing even exists. They're telling us all about this unknown thing, which they cannot possibly know. Secondly, the argument falls into the fallacy of composition, where what is true of a member of said group is not necessarily true of the group as a whole. Just because most things require a cause, that doesn't mean that the universe itself requires a cause. Finally, it assumes that what appears and occurs in our universe must necessarily be true of all possible universes. If there are multiple universes, that doesn't mean that what is true here must be true there. So if, for instance, our universe was triggered by some event in some other universe, and that universe was triggered by an event in yet another universe, and that third universe, or whatever down the line might exist, that simply may not have the physical laws which restrict it from existing eternally. That infinite regress in that universe simply doesn't exist, and that eternal universe has simply always been there. Far too many people, and this is just that folksy knowledge that isn't necessarily correct, simply assume that if there are other universes, they have to be exactly like ours. And that's a fallacious assumption. When you think about it, there's no need for whatever so-called creator out there to be sentient, to have done anything on purpose, or even to still exist. Maybe that eternal universe that started everything else thereafter went poof one day, and out of that poof came the next universe in the chain. Why is that not possible? See, this whole thing is just a means for the religious to add some kind of supposed validity to their already existing beliefs. Because they're starting from their beliefs and then desperately trying to backfill in some kind of rationalization for holding them. It's really quite ridiculous when you think about it. But let's see what else he has to say.
You keep tracing back, you can find a chain of causes and effects.
Nope, you can't. You can assert it, you just can't demonstrate it with objectively demonstrable evidence.
In that chain, it takes time to go from a cause to its effect, just like counting numbers takes time. Now, are there finite number of things in the chain or infinite number of them? If there were infinite number of them, starting from the cause that is infinity away, it could never reach the present time, just like you cannot count backward from infinity to 1. But present time do exist, because we started from a presently existing object, so now exist. This clearly is a contradiction. Therefore, the assumption of infinity causes are wrong. It wouldn't be infinite number of them. Since there are only finite number of them, you can go to the first one, which is the first cause.
There is absolutely no way you could know that, especially since there's no necessary first cause. This is where he starts trying to backfill his own God into that position. Let's watch.
So it is very clear from this logical exposition, we can conclude that the first cause exists. What is the first cause like? What kind of attribute does it have? First, it must not have any causes.
That kinda goes along with the name, doesn't it?
Otherwise, it wouldn't be the first cause. Secondly, it must be eternal.
Eternal backwards? Yes. That doesn't mean it has to be eternal forwards.
Because anything with a start must have a cause. Why? Let's take a look. If a thing has a start, then either it has a cause or it is not the effect of any causes, meaning it comes out from nothing.
Well, there goes that folksy nonsense again. So let's look at this. He's using time as his metric. 13.8 billion years ago, this universe sprang into existence, and as it did, both time and space-time, began to exist. So the concept of before 13.8 billion years ago is absurd because there was no time and therefore there could be no before. So theoretically, let's say that something existed around 14 billion years ago. Does that mean it existed before the universe? No, because there was no time and therefore before is a meaningless concept. Does that make said object eternal? I don't know, not necessarily. It just means that eternity becomes senseless when you're talking about something without time. But for the uneducated, I guess it makes sense, even though it really doesn't.
But something comes out from nothing is not believable to intellects like us.
The uneducated. Yeah, we know, unfortunately.
Therefore, anything with a start must have a cause.
We are unaware of anything that didn't have a start, so this is a total non sequitur. And this takes us right back to the unjustified and unsupported claims that God had no start, which is something that simply has not been proven.
Therefore, it cannot be the first cause. So the first cause must be eternal.
Not supported.
The first cause is non-material either, because if it is material, it cannot escape from the universe.
Now, who says anything can escape from the universe or the multiverse or whatever is actually out there? Prove it!
But universe came from the Big Bang. So Big Bang is the cause of the first cause, which means it no longer would be the first cause. Therefore, the first cause must be non-material.
Oh, look! More folksy, uneducated nonsense.
Since everything came from the first cause, it caused all things.
Not necessarily. What's to say there weren't multiple first causes? There could be a near infinite number of them, assuming that any of this is worth paying attention to at all. So, as is no surprise, more fallacy.
Therefore, it is the creator. So, amazingly, the first cause has the same attributes of God.
No, it doesn't. Now, ignoring that all of those supposed attributes he's already listed are laughable at best, those certainly aren't the only attributes that Christians, and I suppose it could apply to any god that man has ever worshipped, but we'll stick with Christianity for the moment. Christians believe all kinds of things are true of their imaginary friend, things that have nothing at all to do with any of the characteristics already arbitrarily assigned in this video. It's like watching someone who doesn't understand their own theology.
Some may argue that since we can start from any object, why couldn't we get many first causes?
Which is true. I've already asked that. Now let's see how he tries to get around it.
Again, all material things cannot escape from the universe, so no matter what object you started with, it will eventually merge to the Big Bang.
Well, that one came right out of his ass, didn't it? But if it's true, then his God has merged with the Big Bang? I kind of doubt that's what he believes.
Therefore, the first cause will be the cause of the Big Bang.
Which, once again, doesn't stop there from being many different causes, nor does it stop them from acting collectively.
So there can only be one first cause, and the first cause is unique.
And that's something else that he'll have to dance around, because even if we grant that there's a God and that God created the universe, two things that I don't accept, by the way, but for the sake of argument we'll pretend, that doesn't mean that God is the first cause of everything. For all we know, there could have been billions of universes and billions of gods going back trillions of years before that, and the Christian God is just the latest in a long line of creators who made universes. Are we seeing the utter futility of the folksy wisdom that he pushes yet?
Now the atheist would argue that if God created the universe, but who created God? Or, if everything needs a cause, how can God is an exception? Let's say if God needs a cause, then a super God created God. Immediately we need to ask the same question, does the super God need a cause? So a super God exists. Then a super God exists, and super God exists, and on and on. Therefore, we can get a chain of gods.
Actually, it doesn't matter when we're only talking about the last link in the chain. Because again, speaking purely hypothetically, we're not talking about the super God. We're talking about the God that you think created everything in our universe. Whatever might have happened off in the distant past, if past has any meaning without time, is completely irrelevant to your video.
The question is whether this chain has finite number or infinite number of gods. We have gone through this already. It cannot be infinite of them. It can only be finite of them. Since there are only finite of them, we can get to the first one. Since it is the first one, there cannot be anyone before it, meaning it has no cause.
And the first one may not have had anything at all to do with the creation of our universe. It may not still exist. It may not know that we exist or care. So that's not what you're talking about, is it?
This is the result of logical deduction.
Illogical wishful thinking, you mean?
Infinite number of causes are impossible, so the first one is God, and the rest of them are not.
And I already showed how that was a ridiculous assertion to make. But hey, this is about emotion, not logic, remember?
All things need causes, but God is not a thing. He is the creator.
That doesn't stop him from being a thing. I mean, I'm a thing and I'm creating this video. So that's yet another unsubstantiated, irrational claim made arbitrarily about this imaginary being.
By now, atheists agree that from this logic deduction that the first cause exists.
Nope.
They also agree that if the first cause is God, then God has no cause.
Nope. I've already dismantled that one too.
But they will say that why can the first cause be the universe?
Which is a good question, but I'm sure he'll have a nonsensical rationalization for it too.
If the universe is the first cause, then we don't need God.
Obviously. But he won't accept that, will he?
People with this kind of question has a clear motive.
Says the guy with a clear motive to support their pre-existing beliefs in an imaginary friend with no evidence.
Because they cannot stand the existence of God. But is it true that the universe the first cause?
But you don't want to find out because it gets in the way of your emotional comfort. And that's where this whole thing goes horribly, horribly wrong. See, if you don't know something, you don't just get to make up an emotionally comforting answer and say, well, there you go. You withhold judgment and you say you don't know and you keep looking for demonstrable and defensible answers. This is not what the religious do.
This is something worth finding out. Science tells us that the universe is from the Big Bang. So the cause of the universe is the Big Bang. Therefore, the universe cannot be the first cause, period.
Which doesn't mean that the Big Bang couldn't have been that first cause that you're going on about. There's no reason whatsoever that it couldn't have been. Oh, I'm sure he'll try to spin it differently, but realistically, there's no reason why the Big Bang couldn't have been the first cause other than it hurts his precious widow feelings.
Now the atheists will scramble to say, then the first cause must be the Big Bang.
See? What did I tell you?
Can the Big Bang be the first cause? We all know Big Bang had a start when it exploded. Anything that has a start has a cause.
No, the Big Bang had an effect. You have no idea anything else about it.
We have already gone through that. It cannot be the first cause.
Bad assumptions are bad.
Also, the Big Bang came from a high temperature, high density called singularity.
That is one single demonstrable characteristic of the Big Bang. It is not necessarily all of the characteristics of the Big Bang.
It exploded and it became the vast universe.
No, it didn't become the vast universe. It didn't explode. It expanded. Totally different thing that unfortunately you know nothing about.
So the Big Bang had changed. Anything that changes must have a cost.
Says who? And this is especially absurd because the Bible depicts God of changing in many, many places. So by that logic, God must have a cause. This is getting confusing. Wait, not confusing. Stupid. Stupid is the word.
A changing thing has the potential to change, but it cannot change without outside forces.
Then God cannot be the first cause because Jeremiah 26:3 says, perhaps they will listen and each one will turn back from his evil way, and I will change my mind concerning the calamity that I intend to bring on them because of their evil deeds. Geez, have you even read the Bible?
For example, a pine seed falls on the ground with soil. With sunlight and water, it soon will turn into a big tree. But if a pine seed falls on a rock, without sunshine and water, it cannot become a tree at all.
even if it gets sunshine and water, it won't become a tree because it doesn't have soil to grow in. Now, we're not going to say anything about like hydroponics, which allows plants to grow without soil, but you know.
Sorry, Big Bang changed, so it needed outside forces to change, so it couldn't be the first cause.
Total nonsense. This is just a waste of my time at this point because he's so absurdly uneducated and unaware of reality and science. But hey, I guess there's only another couple of minutes, so I guess I'll soldier on.
If you look at anything that explodes,
which the Big Bang didn't do. Come on, this is Science 101.
Like a hand grenade. If you hold the candle, then pull the safety pin, let go the handle, when you throw it away, it would explode.
And that's why it's a hand grenade, not a Big Bang.
Or you just heat it up, it would explode. If you do nothing, it will not explode. That is very clear. Big Bang exploded, but who ignited the Big Bang?
Who says anyone had to? This is yet another unsupported assertion that he'll have absolutely no evidence for.
So the Big Bang must have a cost.
Yeah, nope.
Therefore, I'm sorry to say the Big Bang cannot be the first cause. Obviously, the first cause exists.
No, you've rationalized your way to that unsupported belief, but that doesn't mean that your belief is credible or defensible. It doesn't mean that your God is the first cause, even if it was real. This is what happens when you try to have a battle of wits while being completely unarmed.
The first cause has the attributes of God.
Nope, once again. There are a lot of attributes ascribed to God that have nothing at all to do with the arguments made here.
And the first cause cannot be the universe nor the Big Bang.
Both of which are false, as I've already shown. He's just making assertions without understanding the questions he's asking.
The first cause is also unique.
Again, not defensible. Bad assertion is still bad.
Therefore, if the first cause is not God, what is it?
Who knows? But you have no means to demand that it must be your particular God other than your emotional desire for it to be so. This whole video is an anti-intellectual mess.
So God exists, atheism is wrong, and atheists, please wake up.
I love how he goes from, what is it, to, I'm right. And that's a prime example of the argument from ignorance right there. I don't know what it is, but it makes me feel good to think it's this. Therefore, it's this.
God not only exists, it says in the Bible, in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11.
So, you have read Jeremiah, you just missed that passage where God changes. Huh.
For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you.
Yeah, tell that to the people that God murdered in the flood. Not to harm you my ass.
Plans to give you hope and a future. My friends, this God is a loving God. He wishes you well.
Not if you read the Old Testament.
It will be worthwhile for you to openly and humbly to explore who He is.
Right after you prove that this God of yours even exists. And here's a helpful hint. A book of ancient mythology isn't evidence. Get to work.
May God richly bless you.
May the flying spaghetti monster embrace you in his noodly appendages. Hey, why not? Makes as much sense as your nonsense.
Thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Goodbye. And honestly, this is about what I was expecting it to be. A load of unsupported claims, poor understanding of reality, and wishful thinking. Because when you think about it, that's all the religious have. They want their gods to be real for emotional reasons, and when reality doesn't cooperate, they play word games, invent irrational philosophical arguments, and engage in endless rounds of common sense says, not recognizing that common sense really isn't all that common at all. There is nothing here that I couldn't have predicted from a supposed intro video that I've already addressed. Not one thing here that means a thing to those with a rational clue in their head. But of course not, because the religious, as I keep saying, don't operate on rationality. They operate on feelings. They desperately want a God to exist because the very idea gives them emotional comfort. Whether it's true or not, whether they have any evidence or not, whether the ideas are intellectually valid or not, none of that matters, so long as the idea exists. But I and most other rational atheists, we do care if the claims made by the religious are factually true, whether they're intellectually defensible and supported by objectively demonstrable evidence. That's something that the religious simply don't have, so they resort to preaching to a choir that has no more rationality or intelligence or education than they do. And that's why these videos fail miserably under the unemotional eye of rationality. Not that this guy will admit it, I'm sure. He's far too emotionally attached to the idea of his God, but that's the reality. So, what do you think? Is it worth going on to his other videos? Or are they going to fall apart under even the most cursory evaluation, just like this one did? Let me know in the comments, and let me know if you think it's worth my time.